Welcome to Authors at Drucker. I'm Dave Specht, Director of the Global Family Business Institute at the Drucker School of Management. At the Drucker School, we aspire to become the global meeting place for the world's most influential business-owning families. This conversation today represents progress in our achievement of that objective. Authors at Drucker is an interview series where we feature top authors that write about issues impacting business-owning families. Authors at Drucker is made possible from the generous sponsorship from the James E. Hughes Jr. Foundation. The foundation is dedicated to advancing the study of family governance and generational well-being. We at the Drucker School feel very aligned and very grateful to Jay and his foundation. And in just a minute, I will actually put a free PDF version of the book that we're going to feature today in the chat, so be on the lookout for that. On the last Authors at Drucker, we featured a book called Invisible Wealth, 5 Principles of Redefining Personal Wealth in a New Paradigm. If you missed it, please feel free to check out the recording on our YouTube channel or on our website. Before I begin, I want to share a couple things that we're excited about at the Drucker School, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. The first is our certificate program in advising family enterprises. In this certificate, we're partnering with institutions to help their advisors, financial advisors, CPAs, anyone giving advice to business-owning families. This certificate is really dedicated to focusing on the non-financial challenges that advisors face when working with business-owning families. If you're interested in learning more about that, please feel free to reach out via email. And if you're interested, we recorded our Generational Wealth Masterclass with Jay Hughes, and really excited about that content. We're starting to use it all over the world. Just a few months ago, I leveraged this content for our friends in Uganda, and we're looking at doing the same for friends that we have in Brazil and Uruguay. So if you are interested in learning more about the Generational Wealth Masterclass, please, again, feel free to reach out to me. And now on to the stars of our show today. I'm going to stop sharing so you can see their smiling faces out. Today's guests on Authors at Drucker are Stephen Goldbart, Stacy Allred, and Joan DiFuria. Stephen is a licensed clinical psychologist, professor, and organizational consultant, among other things. Dr. Goldbart is passionate about working with complex family and organizational systems. Stacy Allred is head of family engagement and governance at JP Morgan Wealth Management. Stacy's dedicated her career focusing on her practice on family governance and decision making. And Joan DiFuria is a consultant, and her career is focused on the practice of family governance and decision making as well, and works at the intersection of business and psychology, particularly on issues associated with wealth and their impact on money, the impact of money on children. So Stephen, Stacy, and Joan, welcome to Authors at Drucker, and thank you so much for joining me today. Stephen, I want to get started with you. First of all, I feel like the work that you've put together with this 10 by 10 learning roadmap is really timely. You've accomplished an incredible feat here, the three of you, with taking something that is so complex and making it manageable, and by humanizing this learning and development process for all family members. I have to admit, I do feel a little overwhelmed. Three against one here, but you guys promised that you'll be nice to me, right?
Indeed.
So maybe we should start with you, Stephen. I would love for you just to give us an overview of this 10 by 10 learning roadmap, specifically focusing on the 10 stages of development. Can you help us?
Sure. And first, I'd like to say thank you, Dave, for inviting, Joan, Stacy, and I would like to thank you for inviting us to be with all of you today. Absolutely. In this wonderful conversation. So I'll begin by giving a little background. We've come to understand that one way or the other, but significant financial wealth is going to have an impact on each and every family member. As a client of ours said, financial wealth is like rocket fuel, but where will it take you? I think we've all seen financial abundance can help build well-being and self-esteem, or can undermine it, and has the potential for languishing. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, the three of us took the time to reflect on our years of experience to take a fresh look at how we can best help our clients maximize the benefits and minimize the risks of their money, and learn and grow to be the best they can be as individuals and as a family. When we started, our initial focus was on the creation of a sophisticated governance tool. But we realized that it didn't matter how brilliantly governance or estate planning, for that matter, was created if family members just weren't engaged or didn't have the specific skills for sustainable outcomes. We also knew from research on families of wealth that the successful family is the learning family. But what's the most important things to learn? Let me give you an example. Think about Sue. She's 25. She's in the first few years of her career track. She wanted to know how to best use family wealth in support of her lifestyle, but she was really worried about how using that money might undermine her own motivation to get ahead. She wanted to feel self-sufficient and feel successful in her own right. Well, let's consider somebody at the other end of the spectrum. Let's consider Joe, 65-year-old business owner. He spent 30 years building a business. He's just completing the sale, and he's asking, well, now what? I don't want to just retire. I've got all these skills, but I know I don't want to go back and do just what I've been doing, working 60, 80 hours a week. So we saw that questions like these required a broad lifespan model, a model that defines the key skills at each major life stage, takes into account the differing strengths and life choices of each individual family member, and a model that could provide a tool that could be readily used to educate and mentor all the generations. So the three of us took on what turned out to be an audacious task of building a framework to help family members of all ages from 5 to 100 determine the skills they want to develop to effectively integrate family wealth. And the process for us brought together advanced thinking in psychology, the cognitive sciences, estate planning, research on wealthy families, along with our decades of professional experience to create what we came to call the 10 by 10 learning roadmap. The 10 by 10 is a comprehensive educational tool for all ages, helping family members gain clarity on their goals and take actions that will help them thrive and be connected as a family. So Dave, if you could put up that one slide now, people can take a look at this thing.
All right, I think we have it.
Thank you. So as you see on this chart, the 10 by 10 is comprised of 10 core competencies across 10 life stages, starting with elementary school, middle school, high school, going into early adulthood, and finally into eldering, the latter stages of life. So for example, if you're 45 years old, you're in stage 7, middle adulthood. These 10 competencies are a specific set of skills that support the growth of emotionally intelligent, financially effective, and self-sufficient family members. We then went and built competency charts for each stage of life. Let me bring this to life. So if you remember Sue, who wanted to learn how to best use but not overuse family money for her lifestyle, we asked her to review the competency charts for stage 4, emerging adulthood, which is 25, and that chart included approximately 40 learning activities relevant to that life stage. In using the chart, reading through it, she picked her 3 top priority learning activities, which, by the way, took all of 20 to 30 minutes, and then moved on to work in collaboration with her advisor to build action plans. So I want you to think of the 10 by 10 as both a model and a tool to build action plans. It provides learning choices, activities in each and every life stage across all of these 10 competencies. So maybe I can sum up by saying that the 10 by 10 learning roadmap invites all family members to look at where they're at now, what's possible, where they want to go, and choose what they want to learn. As one advisor who's using it said, it's a discovery process on steroids. It's fun, it's time efficient, and thought-provoking. So there's my mouthful introduction.
Well, I appreciate it. That's a good overview. One of the things that I appreciate most about the model is that it's not focused on a founder. It's focused on the family. It's focused on individuals and their journey. And I feel like as advisors to business owning families, if we can define the client as the family and not the wealth creator themselves, I think we changed the relationship from the get-go. And what your model has done is it's made the 16-year-old in the family as important as the 55-year-old founder. And in my work, when I've been able to serve a 16-year-old and help them to normalize their situation, the parents are so grateful. The rising generation is then connected to me. And anyway, so I don't want to keep bragging about your model, but I think what it does is it redefines the client relationship and also provides ready access to activities that advisors can encourage individuals to take on. Stacy, I want to pivot and move to you and maybe talk about the other part of the model, which are these competencies. Can you tell us about maybe how you landed on these external and internal competencies? Tell us a little bit about that and why they're so important.
Sure. And thank you, Dave. So as you know, as our field was evolving, we were focused really on the external competencies. So our model, as you know, has 10 core competencies, 5 external, basically what you know, and 5 internal, who you are, right? It's more of that EQ. And traditionally, the model's focused pretty heavily or exclusively on those external competencies. And we knew from our work, and as our field continues to evolve, the importance of the internal, that we wanted to take this holistic approach. And so as you're developing frameworks, you know, George E.P. Box, British statistician, has a quote that all models are wrong, some are useful. So we hope that this is useful, but it was tricky to select those exact 10. There's also the saying of MISI, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, that what we were trying to do is within these 10 core competencies, find a place for each of the learning activities across this lifespan ranging from age 5 to 100 of what families of wealth need to learn. And to your point, all family members of all ages. So as we started to think of all the learning activities, we then narrowed down to these top 5 external and internal competencies. So the internal competencies are really the skills necessary for the development of a person that has that solid sense of character. They know who I am, what I'm capable of, and what really matters, right? At each life stage in that kind of stage appropriate way. And it's that combination of the emotional intelligence, the social skills, the learning and growth mindset, responsibility and accountability, health and well-being. And you can call that the internal competencies, but also be considered that vertical development. The external competencies are the skills necessary for the development of a capable and educated person who gets things done, right? And these include the financial skills, the wealth and life planning skills, the stewardship and governance skills, philanthropy skills, and entrepreneurial and family enterprise skills. And Dave, as you know, and going through the model, a lot of these competencies and skills are applicable for anyone, right? Broadly independent of financial success. Mm-hmm. And then there are quite a few that are very specific and tailored to families that have this added complexity that the financial success brings, the added complexity of navigating shared assets, of knowing what it means to not just be a beneficiary, but an excellent beneficiary, and to navigate the kind of the internal and external pressures of being in a family system with that larger than life wealth creator and kind of all of the expectations. So in a nutshell, the internal competencies is about who we are, and the external competencies is more about what we know.
And I love it because, and I think that, again, families need to solve at the intersection of both. If they just focus on external competencies, focus on financial skills, helping them understand the language of, trusts. But if they don't know who they are, if they don't know how to navigate, if they don't see their own future of what of what service are those financial skills. So I love how you've not necessarily given a hierarchy to these external competencies over internal, because again, I think that learning has to take place simultaneously. Thanks, Stacy. Joan, the next question is for you. I noticed at the beginning of each chapter, in the different stages, you list challenges. And as I was reading it, I felt like what this did was it normalized feelings that people have. So, in my own life stage, it normalized some of the things that I'm thinking about, some of the things that I'm worried about. Why was it so important for you to specifically identify challenges in those life stages?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Dave. To focus the audience or overwhelm them a little more, it's actually that every stage has an overview chart of the challenges, the milestones, the takeaways, and the traps to be aware of at that stage. And as you pointed out, Dave, we did want to normalize the fact that human development has specific challenges at every stage of life that each of us have to face and deal with, no matter how much or how little money. So for example, if you don't mind, I'll bring this to light. If you don't mind putting that chart up again, I'd like to talk to one of our clients, Sally. She's 16 years old in high school, and her developmental challenge at this stage, and everyone at this stage of life, is about identity crisis of adolescence. Sorting out who I am, similar or different than my family, finding my own voice, and finding my own pathway. But Sally was uncertain about her post-high school plans. And she also felt over-controlled by her parents' view of who she should be. But using the 10 by 10 did a couple of things. One, it allowed her to see, and her parents to see, that this developmental challenge is in fact normal. And this often reduces a lot of anxieties that parents come to us with when we say, look, read the developmental chart for your teenager, your tween, teen, or adult. It really does help the family reduce some anxiety, knowing that it's a normal challenge of life. One more example is take Ruth. She's age 40, as you can see from this chart, early adulthood, stage 5. She's thinking about settling down with her life partner, Bill, but had real questions as to how much she should tell him about the family wealth. She was also concerned about her career path and how much her recent inheritance would affect her work choices. But when she read the overview charts, she resonated with these challenges. One of the key takeaways of this stage is to gain clarity on the impact of wealth on decision-making in order to maximize the opportunities and minimize the risks.
So one of the things that I take away from this, Joan, I visited with you on the pre-call, is I have 6 kids. I have a ton of homework to do now. I mean, thanks a lot.
Actually, Dave, we're going to make your life easier, because in one overview chart, it's simply one page, will tell you everything you need to know. Reading books after books after books for every age of your children.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this should be a parenting guidebook. Maybe we named it wrong.
I like that idea.
Thanks, Joan. Stephen, one of the challenges we face as advisors to family businesses is kind of figuring out what is the right amount of attention to individual development and then also kind of shared learning. Do you have any thoughts on, how to thread the needle? You've done this with many, many families. What is the right balance between kind of the personal learning journey and a shared learning journey?
It's a good question, a big question, in that, for many years we were deciding what we thought the family should learn, and we get some ideas from them and come in, and the 10 by 10 has shifted it for us. First, I want to say that it can be used for both individual learning and group learning. So we start with individuals building their own learning journey, reflecting their life stage, and as you mentioned, reflecting their unique strengths and vulnerabilities. We then ask each family member to use the 10 by 10 to determine what they would like the shared or group learning to be. Shared learning can be organized by generation, by specific cohorts like cousins, or for the family as a whole. But what's most important here is the family members are telling us what they want to learn. These plans are self-authored. And that keeps the motivation high and means we're not imposing what we think they have to learn. So And that's been key to our whole approach and key to understanding motivation of engagement here. Okay, because one of the challenges in doing learning in families is it being more than a one shot, is getting traction and getting people engaged. So we want them to feel like they're in the driver's seat of the plan, whether it be the individual or the family as a group.
Well, and I think one incredible opportunity you have here is, as we turn learners into teachers, then the learning really is cemented. So as I think about these individual learning journeys, and as I use this with my own family, as I'm curious about what learning journey my 15-year-old son is on, and then I ask him to teach me about what are the projects he's working on, what are the things he's learning, as he teaches us, then those things are really cemented in for him. And I feel like it's a natural connectivity point between him and his siblings and him and his mom and me. So I feel like it's a natural thing, but I was curious how you kind of navigate the difference.
Yeah, we have the family navigator for us. So we
Beautiful.
say it's a good idea to do both, and we're going to follow your lead, and that's the benefit of having a tool like this. They can tell us. It gives them enough real life learning activities by age where they can tell us, and then we can respectfully follow their lead, which is we found to be very, very powerful. And when you're talking about teenagers or young adults, those are the ages where it's very hard to impose successfully on what they ought to learn. But if you put in front of them all these choices, it's really interesting. They often come up with exactly what they need to learn. And that's been very exciting for us.
Yeah, in our family, we call that shoulding them. You shouldn't.
You're right.
Dad, you're shoulding me to death. Don't tell me what I should do. I want to tell you what I want to do. And I think this probably puts it in the proper place. Stacy, I want to pivot to you now, and perhaps you can share an example. I shared, let's assume that we have a wealth creator that just sold their business. Actually, I was speaking with an individual that had this scenario and just talked about how bewildered he was. It was exciting, and then it became really tough, and they felt lost. So let me give you a scenario, and then let's roll up our sleeves and work through it. So there's a wealth creator just sold their business for $30 million. Prior to the sale, the family did not have a lot of liquidity, and lived a fairly modest lifestyle. And for simplicity's sake, let's assume the owner's married and has only one child, and it's a 12-year-old daughter. Let's also assume there hasn't been a lot of proactive learning and preparation prior to the liquidity event. So, Stacy, take us on a journey. How would you use the 10 by 10 to navigate a situation like this, or just get the dialogue started?
Sure. So often the question we get in a situation like that is, at the core, it's that they know they need to do something and they're just not sure where to start, and kind of like what the whole inventory is of how people navigate life after the sale of the business, and now having the responsibility and the opportunity with this significant financial capital. So I'm going to refer to the book, and I'll give a few quick page numbers, but just in a nutshell, here's what they would do. And I want to start with the 12-year-old, because what would it look like for the 12-year-old, right, in that life stage to create? So the first thing is each family member would select their life stage and read their charts, kind of that overview chart that Joan talked about. And then they're going to look at the learning activities, note all that are relevant, and choose their top 3. And I'll get into a little bit more detail there. We did find we have been using this model since we started this, as Stephen said earlier, in the year during the pandemic. So in 2020, we've gotten a lot of experiential learning from the model. One of the things we learned is we needed not just the full version with the 40 plus activities, but also this slim version where we have 10 selected activities. So as these 3 family members opt into the learning journey to create their self-authored learning roadmap, they can choose the full version or they can choose a slimmed down version. And then after choosing those 3 selected activities, they would build an action plan for each chosen activity. And then the 4th step is to review and advance the action plan on a quarterly basis. So let me recap and then get into the detail with kind of some more texture and fabric around how that might look with this case study. They're going to select their life stage and read their charts. So that would be, for instance, on page 139 of the book, if I am 12 and in middle school, then they're going to choose which option, the detailed or the full option, and note all that feel relevant now, narrow down to the top 3. So with the daughter, in this stage in middle school, the stage overview helps kind of her understand her life stage. At that point, it's about fitting in. It's about looking for ways to fit in while also remaining an individual and starting to develop a worldview and a basic set of values. In this stage, she is navigating peer pressure. She's making comparisons. There's the desire to belong. And there's the focus on developing abilities to handle personal situations both inside and outside of the family. She has a lot going on. And now the situation's changed dramatically. And if you think of what typically happens with the sale of the business, it hits the news. Her friends' parents are likely talking about it. She's likely going to get a lot of questions around it. And here she is trying to fit in, and suddenly her family is now, in a different situation. So she reads through it, and she selects these 3 following activities. The first one is under wealth and life planning skills. So it's an external competency, and it's to talk with her parents to develop a simple and rehearsed answer to questions for peers, such as, are you rich? This is one of those things that like any tennis players on today will recognize as like, this is similar to like an unforced error in tennis, right? Like things that could have been avoided. We know, right? And everyone on here working with business owners, when that news hits, family members are likely to get questions, and they can either have an unforced error and be flat-footed and unprepared, or they can have that dialogue. And in this case, with the help of kind of the 10 by 10 and identifying that, shining a light on that, they can help her develop, and with the advisor, an elevator speech.
Can I just jump in real quick, Stacy? One of the things I love about this, and I love this about teaching too, is it's a third party giving an assignment to have a tough conversation that they already wanted to have, but it's like, look, we're trying to work through this roadmap, and mom and dad, it called on me to have this conversation with you. So it suddenly makes it okay to be the person that asks that question, because it's a question based on an assignment that was given. I love it. I mean, that's in my family business classes, it's permission to have challenging conversations. And the even better thing is the parents can review those prior to that 12-year-old seeing, so that they can have a heads up and maybe practice about how they're going to respond to some of those questions. So sorry to jump in there, Stacey, if you can continue.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. And Dave, my favorite elevator speech I learned from a 7-year-old, to when she got the question, are we rich? She replied to her friends with help of her parents, yes, we're rich in spirit. I thought that was beautiful. Okay, so the second learning activity was to look for ways to make shared decision-making, such as planning a family vacation within a set budget. She had a lot of ideas as a 12-year-old of where the family might go with this newfound liquidity. And she wanted to have a say in planning that. And so those are a wonderful opportunity her parents agreed to build new skills. And then social abilities. This is an internal competency to build closer friendships around shared interests and other character traits that you admire. So, and she would take all of these and build an action plan. Now, in looking through and working with a lot of family members in stage 2, the middle school, there's another one in here that's really popular. And while it's not often the middle schooler that chooses it, the parent, in going through this, it's super helpful for the parents to read through also, found under responsibility and accountability, there's the learning activity of understand and manage the influence of social media and put a family social media policy in place. And so they wanted to be really intentional about, it's a smart thing to do. And there's some wonderful examples of social media policies. So in the interest of time, I can either stop there or go into a little bit of what the learning journey might look like for the dad or the mom, wealth creator, who would be in stage 6.
So who I'm interested in most is mom, because mom might be, in this case, overlooked, underestimated, and also underserved probably by the advisor. So let's focus on mom in this case.
Okay, so let's say mom is 40. That is right at the cusp of stage 6 and stage 7. So when you're right at the cusp, it does go, age is a good starting point, but you could either be the stage earlier or later, kind of depending on where you are, and if I'm a young soul or an old soul. So sometimes I'm going to need to read both, or I'll read one that I think might be right and start the other. Okay, so mom chose 3 learning activities. The first one was financial skills. And mom was, so this one was around starting or expanding financial planning, setting goals and objectives, cash flow planning, tracking net worth. That same sort of rigor that happened with the business, wanted to build a financial plan. And often in situations like this too, they also want to put safeguards in place because they're worried about that entrepreneurial spouse that could take all the money and go start a new business without security.
That's never happened, Stacy. Come on.
The second one was wealth and life planning skills. And we see this a lot. Develop a strategic life plan, including for personal transitions. And that, kind of that life stage is also a common time for change and career change, right? With this, no longer the necessity for an income, to earn an income in this family. What does that productivity, right, paid or unpaid, look like? We know we need productivity to be happy. And that last one was social abilities. Strengthen the ability to attain a comfort zone with wealth, understanding and managing the envy, jealousy, and guilt that can surface in relationships. Oftentimes there's siblings that, now if we have financial diversity, there might be kind of some pressure or questions from siblings or parents. And how do you handle that and kind of that internal journey? So I'll stop there, but it's so each family member, right, would choose their learning activities. It's helpful to share them with each other, build that action plan, and get started with their advisor, with a thinking partner, with the coach, whatever made sense based on the activities they selected.
Well, I love it. I mean, I feel like you've given us a tool that makes us more naturally empathetic to each person on the journey, and gives us a tool to, kind of encourage our curiosity about what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. And I can personally attest to, if we've been trained in financial services, it's likely that we have not had the training that you're saying that we probably need to be able to help these families navigate these transitions. Joan or Stephen, anything to add to that scenario, or any other thoughts at this juncture?
Sure. I think that I'll just add that I think what Stacy just provided is a good example of what I started with, which is that wealth's going to have an impact. Mm-hmm. So how you manage it, and we'll add to that, wealth's going to have impact on everybody. So with that assumption, starting with this very simple activity, which is not rocket science, handing out these charts and you read through them. Once people start reading what's on the charts, which are very on-the-ground learning activities, they go, wow, that's interesting. Oh, is that what's going on during the stage? So there's a wake-up call element of it that's just interesting learning. And then it allows them the space to say, oh, that's what I want to go for. And the more we do that across every member of the family, the more successful we're going to be.
I totally agree. Joan, this next one is fairly connected, and maybe we've touched on it already, but maybe you can expand on it. One of the challenges that some family members feel, especially during these wealth events, is they feel like there is a hierarchy to their importance or lack of importance. And some families, some family members feel less than and ignored, looked over, looked around, looked through. What's been your experience in leveraging the 10 by 10 roadmap to kind of level the playing field as to each individual member of the family's importance and worth?
That's, Dave, it's interesting. When we started doing our work, Stacy, Steve, and I 25 years ago, it was highly focused on the wealth creating generation.
Yeah.
Other times it's focused just on the rising generation. But the beauty, the fun and beauty of our models, we emphasize that the successful family is the learning family across all generations. The 10 by 10, as you can see, is designed to hear the voices of each and every family member from age 5 up to 100, or bless, if you live longer, you can go further. So, I personally find this very satisfying because family members get engaged and are excited when they discover the opportunities that the 10 by 10 brings. And the other beauty of this is that it takes 20 to 30 minutes for advisors to sit down with their families and pick 3 learning activities. It's an easy buy-in. It's a rapid sense of accomplishment. And I think Stacy illustrated so beautifully how at any age, someone can pick the 10 by 10 up and be motivated to do something because it's about what they want, what matters to them at this stage of their life. And so I'll leave it there because I know there's a lot more to ask, but that is the beauty. The 10 by 10 does not discriminate.
I love it. No, absolutely. It's so important. Stacy, I want to actually, before that, I would love to encourage the audience. I'm going to try to not hog all your attention, but I want the audience to go ahead and submit questions in the chat. I'll be looking to those questions, and then we'll open it up in just a few minutes to audience questions. So I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll get to the audience. Stacy, this one's for you. In my experience working with financial advisors that are working with business owning families, much of their focus has been on external competencies, and probably because that's what's most comfortable for the advisor. What sort of reactions have you received when you incorporate things like these internal competencies of emotional abilities, social abilities, or even responsibility and accountability? Like, how are advisors reacting to you encouraging them to have this be a part of their planning process?
It depends on the background of the advisor. A family governance consultant is like, of course. But if I'm more of a financial advisor, I might have a little bit of anxiety around this. And what we found is that advisors want to know, financial advisors like to know the answers to the questions before they ask the questions. And so this does stretch them a little bit. It requires them to stretch their comfort zone a bit. But it would be like going to the gym and only working out like the left side of the body if we're only doing the external. And one of the things that we know with the speed of change and AI and everything that's going on is the internal competencies are incredibly important. And so we help them understand that this is a model that takes a village, that they are going to stay in their lane and help with the coaching and implementation on what they are qualified to do. But they can be a thinking partner and think through action plans and, kind of do some of that, but they're going to bring in the right skills and resources for the different learning activities. And so once they kind of understand how that works, they can get a little bit more comfortable with it. I will say one more thing about the internal competencies that surprised us is that time and time again, you'll have like that really hard charging wealth creator that you think might choose all external, and they surprise their families by choosing all three in the internal. And so we just smile when we see that. And it's the beautiful kind of self-awareness of them developing some of those other skills.
That is nice.
Great question.
I just want to add one more thing to what you said, Stacy and
Okay.
Dave, which this is simply about the internal competencies are simply about the human capital. And this is what Jay Hughes has talked about for such a long time now. So we've tried to incorporate that because our clients don't want to simply be seen for their money. They want to be
Yeah.
known for who they are, what they feel, what they think beyond the dollar.
And my main question to advisors that struggle with this are you curious and do you care? Because when you're working with a family, you can't fake that. You cannot fake if you're not genuinely curious about them as a family and as an individual, they will see it, they will feel it. And do you care about them? And this is just, the roadmap is giving them a tool. And also, most families, again, advisors believe that they're hired to have the answers. But I'm trying to flip that on its head. Most families are hiring advisors for better questions so that the family can answer those questions for themselves and then allow advisors to basically translate their intentions into technical plans. So anyways, we're going to get to some questions from the audience. Alan, you have a question in the chat. I would love to hear your voice if you're willing to come on and go ahead and ask your question. Alan Reese.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Super. So looking at the internal competencies, the human capital, I'm wondering, do you have any suggestions or recommendations for, I know that not everything is as amenable to quantification, right? There's qualitative aspects that are tremendously important, but if you're looking for measuring progress or evaluating success, given that some of those factors seem to me naively is more challenging to measure in a way, particularly because a lot of it is sort of very personal, to measure it in a way that respects the privacy of the individual family members, but still allows the advisor to provide some degree of account to say, listen, here's the progress we've made. Here's the advances we've made. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Can I take that real quick and then I'll turn it to you guys? Let them be the judge of their progress. And most likely we will have to encourage them, pat them on the back, and show them that they have made progress. They will be harder on themselves than you could ever imagine. And now I'll be quiet. To the experts.
That was a really good answer. So I guess the background of your question would be interesting to me, like who you're trying to be accountable for, your firm or for the family? Like who you're trying to demonstrate that there's been progress?
Yeah, no, I would think more. I'm thinking more from the family's perspective.
Okay,
like,
okay.
In a situation where
easier.
you're introducing this, where it's sort of newer to have these conversations, how do you say, listen, here's what we've done, here's where we've moved?
Right. So, and that also speaks to how do you create doable action plans that people are likely to implement and slowly but surely make progress that works. So I would agree with Dave that the construction of benchmarks or how we decide that there's progress is something that's discussed with each and every individual family member. And it's done on a timeline that works for them. So that, some people, their time available for learning is 10 minutes a day. Some people have an hour or two a week. It really depends. It's just highly customized. It really depends upon who they are, where they're at in their life, what we're trying to accomplish. Sometimes the learning curve, and we have found that, small incremental changes are the ones that stick rather than big leaps. It's not just that's learning theory. So we tend to build models that are pretty easy for them to make accomplishments and then just build on that over time. Whether it be really in any of these domains, particularly the ones that are in the internal side. Does that answer your question?
Fantastic.
I also want to just add that some of the progress is not very complex. If we look at the mental health side of things, when a lot of these retirees now want to find out what to do with their time because they're no longer working, it can be as simple as going to the gym twice a week. That progress speaks for itself. If they stop going to the gym, that's not going to work out well. But some of the progress we're looking at is not complex at all.
Yeah. We have a lot of questions in the chat, so we're going to go a little bit rapid fire here. Lisa Nam, if you're available, I'd love to have your voice and have you ask your question.
Hi, Dave. This is a great session, and hello, everybody.
Hi.
So I'm working with a family, and they have like a 12-year-old, and we're kind of talking about this their priority of wanting to help their children primarily develop a healthy relationship with wealth. So I'm starting to launch this conversation around the 10 by 10, and I get this question about rolling eyeballs from teenagers and tweenagers. So I thought if you could you give us some tips about how to encourage like a tweenager to self-author their own roadmap and kind of keep the parents at bay and keep them from like authoring it for the 12-year-old. Thank you.
I'm going to be a visionary here and just share something that we have found this year to be happening, which we never anticipated, Lisa, which is a lot of times where you're getting new families based on the fact they want their children to do the 10 by 10. They don't do it for themselves. They're saying, oh, we really want to meet you because we want our kids to do this. We have found time and time again that it doesn't take a lot for a young adult or a teenager to want to share their voice about things. In fact, one of the teenagers I work with said, I actually want to learn how to do my taxes before I go off to college. The parents were just amazed. But I'm going to stop there to say this was something we never anticipated, bringing families in through the teenagers, not through the wealth creating generation.
I think that happens more than we realize. You know, how many times advisors want to engage us to say, fix my kids. It's like, well, that's not really what we're doing here. Let's go on a journey together. I would also add, Lisa, when a parent shows that they're vulnerable and they're concerned about themselves and where they are and expressing, this is something that I really feel like I need to improve, that may be the first time that they're very vulnerable with their children. And I've gone so far as to ask some of my kids to hold me accountable. This is something I'm working on, and I want you to know about it. I want you to hold me accountable to it because I'm trying to get better. That kind of vulnerability from a parent, I think, just invites the children to also be a little bit vulnerable. I mean, obviously, we need to find things that they're interested in, but I don't think we can sign them up and make them do anything. Let's go to our next question. Thanks, Lisa. Tim, do you want to come on and ask your question?
Sure. If I remember what it was. So, many of the activities have recommendations to bring in external support, whether through coaches or educators. How do you help families navigate that? Do you have kind of a list of like preferred people that you would refer to? Do you let them find that on their own? Or let kids select coaches on their own? Like, what does that look like in your work with families?
Stacy, you want to take that one?
Sure. So as they're selecting their activities, one of the questions we're asking is always, how much time do you have to commit to this? What's doable? We want it to be not too easy, not too hard, the right amount of challenge. So that's kind of helping guide. And then what's your preferred method, right? If it's an online course, podcast, or selecting, as you're suggesting, Tim, a coach that meets. And a lot of times you really accelerate the progress if you're having that coach that you are having routine meetings with. Most common, it's once a month for an hour. We have, and I'll let Joan and Stephen comment on how they do it. We have a list, an ever-growing list of outside providers that are screened. We always provide 3 options. And so what we're doing is we're trying, it's someone that's highly skilled, and then they're selecting more for fit and style. So oftentimes they'll interview a few coaches before deciding on the coach. The action plans typically are multimedia, meaning it's a combination of coaching, podcasts, books, articles, and we're also, when you're doing this, you might be doing it with a peer learning group, and you're crowdsourcing the wisdom from the group in terms of learning activities, questions, That's been a really fun part of it too. And let me give just one last idea quickly, and then I'll stop. When we have a selected learning activity, one of the fun things to do about it is before you start with any resources is to do a question burst and have 3 people, just no solutions, develop a list of 20 questions around that learning activity, and then they select a couple that they want to start to pursue to really kind of hone in on that action plan around that learning activity. So great question.
Let me just add something briefly, which is, I think, what was made earlier, is we see the advisor as the quarterback here, and so you're helping the client sort out what the resources are, and part of that is every firm developing a certain amount of these resources. We're planning to develop some on our site that we have available, but it turns out that it's highly customized for each family member and can be regionalized also. A colleague of ours using this did something really smart in his family meeting. He created small cross-generational teams, like a 20-year-old with a 50-year-old, to work on the action plans, using both internal family resources and what they know, right? And it was another way of connecting family members, both in terms of how they can help each other and just what they know in their community. So it's a great way of building networking and building resources.
And
Thank you for the question.
developing an experience-rich family. I can see sharing the learning journey with someone that's not in your stage could be something that really connects you in a way that maybe otherwise you wouldn't connect. Fantastic. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Jan, your question was connected somehow, but did you feel like it got answered? If it was close and highly related, but anything to add there?
Yeah, I would be appreciated to add some question. I mean, from my point of view, is just, and it is just a little bit of question. Where is just the path from content into context? I mean, as a family, from my point of view, a family is just a perpetual learning machine. It should be, in the end of the day. It should be. But you can learn a lot. But in the end of the day, if there is nothing on action, or do you bring these type of content into context, into actions? In the end of the day, knowledge isn't valuable. My question is more: is this just from you both just a perspective or on issue for this integrated advisor? Who is actually, or who will oversee all these learning activities, cross-generational, and bring all pieces together? Could be this from your perspective also, or could be the family office play a pivotal role for the family? But the question is more how we bring these from your perspective, how we we as advisors more content into context. That's just, in the end of the day, that makes knowledge credible. And do you have some thoughts on this?
Who would like to? Ladies, like to respond?
Let me start with the first thing that comes to mind. I'll be super quick and turn to Joan. The first thing that comes to mind is the Stoic saying that's oh so true, that you have to blow your own nose. So we want each family member to really have skin in the game and to have the core responsibility for their learning activities. And then the question becomes, if you're starting there, what's the right amount of support? And we've worked with single family offices that are really well staffed and are putting significant amount of time in a chief learning officer role and doing amazing learning journeys. So the level of support, even if the family members blowing their own nose, they're getting a lot of support. And then other families might meet once a year in a family meeting and they're getting a checkup on the learning activities. And then you have kind of everything in between. So I think it depends on the relationships, and role clarity is important here. and building that action plan. Part of that action plan is delineating what are the check-ins, right? If you're doing a quarterly review with the family, are you checking in on a quarterly basis on the learning activities, or is it something different? And I'll see what Joan would add to that.
Well, Stacy, I don't need to add more except to say on a different level, it's an organic process, Jen, that happens, because even if it starts with individual family members, eventually that information gets integrated together as a family. Let me just give you a specific example. A family we work with every 6 months for the last 7 years. We've been taking through the learning journey every time we meet with them and engaging on that. And as of the last meeting, now what we're doing is family and cohort learning journeys. So it keeps extrapolating off of each other. And that if you put that together, there's a holistic model that eventually forms by the parts of its pieces.
I was thinking the very example in that they're kind of a model family, and in that they have a family office. And the family office is really on board around the notion of family learning, so all the parts are working together. And, from a systemic perspective, to implement any learning journey that's going to go on over time, everybody has to be on board, so everybody needs to be supporting and collaborating and each other's work as we support the work of the advisors and the philanthropic team and so on.
I would add just one more thing is, some of our individual development we don't necessarily want to share with everyone. So I think there is some privacy, but also where it's appropriate to share our individual goals with the family members can be highly effective, because I think one of the most underestimated capitals that we have is our relationship capital. If I'm trying to learn something, if Stacy knew that I was trying to learn that thing, she might be able to connect me to the best person in the world who knows how to do that thing. So I think that's another value. And as family members are co-investing in each other's learning journeys, that just unites individuals. All right. Well, no surprise here. Our time has flown. I want to just give one more minute to one of you, probably only, but is there anything that we didn't cover that you feel like you really want to highlight before we send these great people back into the world? Any final comment?
Very quick piece is that at every stage of life, in the bigger picture, every stage of life, especially as we get older, we want to ask ourselves that question about what really matters to me. At this time in my life, what's important to me, and how do I use my resources for myself, my loved ones, and the greater community? And the 10 by 10 gets people to pause at that very question, which is a much more philosophical, meaning, purposeful question. And after all, it is about purpose and meaning of our lives and our wealth. So I think this is a nice way to get people to sit back and look at the much bigger question, if it's spiritual, religious, whatever, a bigger question of life that we all grapple with, especially as we get older.
I would just add, I think that the healthiest thing is for us to not be a former anything, but to be a future something. And so what this 10 by 10 learning roadmap teaches us is that we should be in active pursuit of who we want to become today, and who we want to morph into for tomorrow. And so thank you all so much for investing your precious time with us today. Joan, Stacy, Stephen, really appreciate the work that you've put in and letting the world have this. So I would encourage each of you on the call to go and get the 10 by 10 learning roadmap. I did share a link in the chat. There's also a course that's available, and so I will send a link to all of you that registered, so that you can also check out that course if that would be helpful for you. Again, thank you so much for joining us on Authors at Drucker, and make it a great day.
Thank you, Dave.
And thank you.
Bye-bye.
Join in.